somehow you've stumbled in here yet again to the Foxfire Farmhouse.
Coming if this from is the cold.
Have a seat.
Have a seat and let us tell you a terrible, terrible tale.
Here's a warm cup of cocoa for you to warm your bones. I'm Josh Bartels, one of the proprietors here of this establishment, joined by Elijah Heyman over there stoking the fire for you.
We don't just tell you to be warmed.
No, we actually warm you.
We actually warm you.
And we actually bring you drink.
Bring your drink and blanket.
Of course, we do none of these because this is a podcast and you're not here in our cozy farmhouse.
Yes.
But if you ever do get the chance to drop by, please do.
Yes, if you can find out where we're at.
And if you do find it, please don't. We're not really inviting you to come hang out.
We're going to cut it out of the podcast if you stumble in.
Anyway, if you have stumbled in here and you don't know where you are, this is a podcast where we talk about movies, and we usually don't introduce the podcast saying anything about what the podcast is. We just jump right into it. But this time, we're going to say that this is a podcast about movies, digital storytelling, or storytelling with digital media. Anyway, we don't have a real clear tagline other than the podcast. So
digging into movies with I don't know, Christian worldview.
So welcome to the farmhouse, and we're glad you're here.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about a movie called Beyond the Mask, a Christian film, and we're going to be trying to take a look at it through the lens of some of what we talked about a few episodes ago regarding Christian movies. And so we're going to get to that here in just a minute. But before we do, we like to give our listeners something that we've been enjoying and recommend it to them. So, Elijah, what have you been enjoying over there on your stool by the fire?
I've been enjoying something that fits that theme, that tone that you've just painted with your words. My favorite movie of all time, I'm just going to give you a quick little thing. My favorite movie of all time is the Keira Knightley Pride and Prejudice. Great film. Nothing I've watched has topped it in my sincerity of appreciation for it. But this one came pretty close. It's in the same vein, Little Women. It's not the old one. A lot of us have seen the first one. But there's a new one. It was made in 2019, I believe. It has Emma Thompson in it. Emma Thompson.
Emma Watson.
One of the Emmas. It has
her name, I don't know how to say it. I think
it's Saoirse
Ronan?
Saoirse Ronan, whatever. She's an Irish actress. And it has a couple other people in there. It has the sister from Black Widow. Anyway, it also got Timothy Chalamet from Dune fame. Yes. And it's just a delightful movie, and
it really is.
You would expect it being made in 2019 to be a feminist manifesto, but it's actually a very, very beautiful story, and it has four, like my wife said, and I agree with it. It has four intermingling love stories, and it handles them all very well. Yeah, it was just a really delightful story. It has moments where you cry, obviously. It has moments where you're laughing because it's funny. The sisters act like sisters. It's four sisters. I won't go too much into the story because I think most people know about Little Women. But it's just a story about four sisters and their lives growing up and the ways that they go and how it ends up different from kind of their childhood imaginations.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's a wonderful take on the tale.
Yeah.
Like it really was.
Yeah.
Splendid.
It's really good. And they go in, and compared to the other one, they go into other sisters a bit more because the first one's really about Jo. Jo is a writer, and she is very strong-willed and doesn't want to get married. But in the end, she finds somebody, and she chooses to love them. And it doesn't look the way, like this amazing romantic tale like she's always believed it would. But it's really good. It hits that eye in the pie in the sky romance and hits it with some pretty good reality. And it does a good job of telling a love story. And I would recommend it to everyone. It does certainly a better job with a love story than a certain film we will talk about here in a few moments.
So before we get to that love story,
yes.
I'll take you to a older book called Princess and the Goblin by George McDonald. George McDonald was one of the authors that C.S. Lewis really appreciated. And it is a harder... Yep. It is a harder book to read. I just finished reading it out loud to my children. And it was a little more difficult for them to follow and for me to read it in a way that was more understandable. You know how sometimes just the way someone reads something can make it more understandable. I had to really work at that with my children. And even still, we'd stop and define words, things like that. But it's the story of this princess who has a grandmother who is up in the attic, basically, who helps her kind of get through life. And she's a princess, or the girl is a princess. She's got her grandmother up in the attic. And then she runs across this boy named Curdy, who's a miner's son, and they are digging in the mines. And the miner's son uncovers a goblin plot to steal the princess and force a marriage between the humans and the goblins so as to establish peace. And if they aren't able to do that, they're going to flood the mines and kill all the miners because they overestimate the importance of miners to the world above. And so what you end up with is this beautiful tale of a young girl and a young boy who are just trying to be good people. And so it's really, it has something of a grasp on virtue that looks concrete for young people. So that it is the kind of tale that you can take to your children and say, this is the kind of person you want to be. This is what it means to be a princess. This is what it means to be a prince. And here's how you live it out. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful tale. Great little book. So I listened to it out loud, and I would recommend an audiobook version for people who want to read it because it's easier to take in that way if you've got someone else reading it to you. Because it's kind of a little more older language. So it's not immediately accessible or not maybe immediately palatable. But the story is wonderful. Yeah. So it's really good. I'd recommend that. So let's jump into Beyond the Mask. No, this is not a Jim Carrey movie. This is something very different than a Jim Carrey movie.
Very different.
So what is Beyond the Mask?
Not behind the scenes for.
let me read the one sentence synopsis from IMDb.
There you go.
A British East India Trading Company assassin seeks to redeem his past by thwarting a plot against a young nation's hope for freedom.
That's one sentence.
That sounds pretty epic.
That sounds pretty epic.
It does.
It's telling.
Here's one written by Matt Smith, and maybe the Matt Smith of Doctor Who fame. I don't know. Maybe Doctor Who has watched this thing and written this synopsis. Who knows? But Matt Smith is a pretty unique name, so it's got to be him, right?
It's the most unique name I've ever heard.
The chief mercenary for the British East India Company, being double-crossed by his former employer, has made his way to America, to the American colonies. Working to redeem his name, William Reynolds now hides behind a different mask in hopes of thwarting his former employer. As his past life closes in on him, Will must somehow gain the trust and help of his beloved Charlotte, a woman he has been lying to, as well as a colonial intellectual by the name of Ben Franklin. All the while, he races against time to defuse a plot that could have a devastating effect on the birth of a new nation. So that synopsis is about as
honestly, it sounds so much better
as a synopsis than it does when you actually watch it. So
honestly, that synopsis, I think, it tells a more concise. It keeps a vision better than the film actually executes.
So let's back out real quick. So a few episodes ago, we talked about wrestled with the question, what is a Christian movie?
Yep.
And to sum up that in one group of criteria, when people refer to a Christian film, they mean one of these three things and most likely more than one. One of them is that it was made by Christians. Number two, that it deals with Christian content. So it's, about a church or something along those lines.
Jesus.
Or it is a movie that is marketed to Christians. So it's one of those. This movie checks all of those boxes. So almost anyone will look at this movie and say that it is a Christian film.
Undoubtedly.
And so that's why we want to talk about this movie in particular, is to try to think about what does this movie do well and what does it not do well. So where are Christian movies failing and why do we think that is? Because, like I pointed out back when we talked about Christian films, there is a up-and-coming new streaming production type service called Lure that has the tagline, Christian movies shouldn't suck. And they say that. And the problem is that it's absolutely obvious that that is true. And it's a joke that's made. People malign Christian movies in much the same way that there's jokes about Hallmark movies. And so the question is, why are they like that? And what could we do to redeem them, to make them better, to really kind of get back at the heart of that kind of big fiction Christian vision of people like a C.S. Lewis or a George McDonald or a J.R.R. Tolkien? How can we get there? And so we want to take a look at this movie as a test case of here's a movie that had a lot going for it and that Elijah and I think falls flat on its face. So we're going to jump right into this movie. If you haven't seen it, then you're going to be missing out on what exactly we're talking about. But anyway.
I wouldn't worry too much about spoilers. You can listen to our review and then watch it, but watch it, make your own opinion.
Yeah, think through some of these things and see what we're talking about.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. What did you say before?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and start with the production itself.
Yes.
So it is made by Christian people.
The Burns brothers.
Tell us about who made it.
Yeah. So the Burns brothers. There's 3 of them, I believe, but 2 are primarily in the front of the house. I don't know the art director's name, but Chad Burns is the director, and his brother Aaron Burns is the primary producer of this film. So they this is their second feature-length film that they've set out to make. They haven't, I don't believe they've gone to film school for these things necessarily. Maybe they did.
Yeah,
I'm not going to speak to that authoritatively.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
They might have. Anyway, so they set out to make this film, and they wanted to make a film with the vision of bringing people to Christ. It seemed that's their vision. They wanted to make a film that was undoubtedly a Christian film, but also checked the boxes of being a fun family action film. Something in the vein, and I think if you look at the back of the DVD, it says it's on the same playing field as what did it say? As Zorro. Something in that vein.
Yeah, it's trying to, and you can kind
Zorro,
of self-consciously
Caribbean,
see those references.
Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of visual plays on that and story plays on those things. But the production, they grew up as homeschoolers, and that plays largely into the community that came together to make this film. The actors are, a lot of them are professional actors, but the behind the scenes, just like with the art director, their brother, they made all of these dresses and all of these sets through the power of the homeschooling community primarily, and the Christian community. In terms of making these sets, they've made so many sets, spent so many hours on them, making all of these dresses by hand.
And to start off, when we say that they made these dresses by hand, I think sometimes we can think that means they're campy.
Yeah.
But the costuming in this film is stunning. It's really good.
It's definitely on par. This is the one area that I think that they are on par with Hollywood. I think that they made some very good sets, and they made their CGI not the greatest. But it
fits within their budget range. It looks
like
good
for the budget.
Yeah, it looks like a solid visual effects work that doesn't blow you out of the water.
No,
but it definitely fits. It's not the kind of thing
you're
that
able to
looks
see
like
past it into the story. You're not like, oh, that looks terrible the whole time. But you notice it's there sometimes compared to like watching billions of dollar movie.
Right.
But yeah, they do a really great job of that, and with the costuming, it's all, I think, the strongest suit. One of the big things about production that you need to know about is that they brought in a group or council or board to watch them as they made this film to make sure that they were on track and that they were on vision with making a Christian film and making it what they wanted it to be, which was to reach people with the gospel.
And so I assume, I don't know how much more you know about that, but are they looking then to make sure the content is not bad and that there's a Christian message? Is that kind of then what the oversight is looking for?
That's the oversight. The oversight was to make sure that they didn't make any, like they didn't give in any temptation to do anything that would compromise something in the gospel, or with content, or with the giving of the gospel, which there is a scene in the movie where they actually do give the gospel. And a part of that board was one of the Kendricks brothers, which are the guys who made Courageous and Fireproof and all of those other other films. They were on set with him all the time. The guy who wrote the movie was the creator of Adventures in Odyssey. And also one of the guys on the board was Dr. Del Tackett. People would know him from the Truth Project. And he's a larger figure in the Christian community in America. So yeah, so they put all these things in place, and it has all these things going for it. So it's got like $1 million budget. So it's got some. That's not a huge budget in movie terms, but it's got some serious money behind it. That it's got a lot going for it. Mm-hmm. But yet, in the end, when you watch the story, it just doesn't work. Nope. And so I want to jump into like, why does this movie not work? What is it about the story that falls flat on its face? And I want to illustrate, or I guess we'll start at the very beginning of the movie, and then we can run wherever you would think would be helpful in this movie to go to, to illustrate this kind of thing. But in the beginning of the movie, it opens up with, number one, it opens up with a narration that is very exposition heavy. And maybe to back out, let's define what it means to have exposition in a film. So in any kind of story, you have to relay information about the characters, about the plot, about the world, about what's going on. And so that information has to come across some way. Now, in a visual medium like cinema, you can do it in a bunch of different ways.
There's a bunch of different ways that you can communicate certain ideas. And I mean, really, that's in some ways an unlimited range of ways you can do it. One of the easiest and most obvious ways is just to tell someone, you know, like, what year is it? The year is 1776, right? If I say that, then they're going to know what year it is without missing it. I could, though, just hint at the year by, you know, showing things that people know happened in 1776, right? Like show the signing or the Declaration of Independence, something along those lines. You could do that kind of thing to demonstrate this is the year that it's in.
Somebody reading a newspaper.
Yeah. So
even,
I mean,
even to that, even to that, it's still written.
But but it's still, you could do these things that indicate what time it is, what year it is. And so there's different ways to go about that. And if the whole movie was made up of that, then basically what you end up having is the IMDb summary of the plot, not an actual film that you're watching and you're getting to see the stuff happen.
It turns into a book.
Yeah, it just turns into a book. And it's not as good as a book because a book is written in a way that all of that information is communicated but even in books, it's not, the exposition has to be handled well. Yeah. Right? You learn about a character through what they do. And I think that's maybe item number one, is that you learn about people by the choices that they make. Real world, what did they do? What did they say? Yeah. And so the movie opens with a narration, and the narration is
about to back out. A great trading company.
Kind of setting the stage. And you see Will as the assassin in India, I guess, trying to steal documents that implicate his employer as being a part of a bunch of criminal activity that was happening in India. And so he's killing these guys on the ship, getting on board the ship, stealing the documents, right? Yeah. And so this is our first introduction to Will the assassin. And a whole part of what's coming is his redemption from his terrible, wicked past. Yet, what do we see when we see him attack the ship? We see him shoot with this gun that very possibly is ambiguous as to whether or not it's a bullet rifle or whether it's like an air rifle that's shooting tranquilizer darts. You don't know. Like, the guys don't die, or you see them fall, but you don't. It could be a dart gun. It's not. Yeah. The gun isn't obviously like blowing huge amounts of gunpowder where, you just know they're dead. And then they sneak on. There's no problem. There's no conflict. There's no problem he has to solve. All you see is him in the ship, grabbing the paper,
judo a couple guys, and
and then get out. And well, does he even judo anyone in the beginning?
No, actually, no.
I think he just sneaks on. He's like going all Splinter Cell and just sneaking in, and then they are gone. And that's all we get to see of Will in his past. And then he shows up at his boss's house, which a very key element of this movie that we have not mentioned yet is that John Rhys Davis is
Gimli himself.
Gimli himself shows up in this movie. He doesn't have a sweet axe nor a sweet beard.
He has a terrible wig.
He has a terrible wig, which all wigs back then I think were pretty terrible. It's part of the it's part of the costume. And he is the infamous Charles Kemp in this movie, the guy who is in charge or a leader in the East India Company and who's committed all these terrible crimes. And so Will goes into his employer and presents these papers to him. Now, Will is trying to play the part of a gentleman because he's kind of trying to get out of his line of work. We're not told why.
John
We're
Wick
just told.
style.
Yeah, right.
He wants out of the game.
He wants out of the game. And so he turns in his tokens. Yeah, go watch John Wick. That would be a more fun movie to watch than this one. But he goes in and he talks to the employer. He wants to get out. The employer doesn't want him to get out. He wants him to stay in. And he has to make a decision as to whether or not he's going to. And he says, no, basically I'm out. You still owe me money. And I've done everything perfectly for you. I've been a good boy. And why won't you give me my money? And why won't you let me go? And so he goes to leave. And they blow up his carriage. They set this bomb underneath it, which inexplicably is blowing out tons of sparks when they get on the road, but not before. And I'm not exactly sure. Let's not think too much about the mechanics of how that works. But anyway, so a big part of the plot is that there's this preacher who's on his horse that sees the sparks underneath the carriage, and this vicar rides up and is warning them. Another interesting oddity about the plot is that there's also a guy in the carriage who's been tasked to shoot him. And apparently the guy on the top of the coach also knows and attempts to kill him. All the while there's a bomb that's about to blow up the whole carriage. So, including them. So don't stop thinking about this plot here. Just let it
let it marinate.
Yeah. So then, anyway, so Will escapes and the vicar dies. And he takes the vicar's place and on we go.
Yeah.
But if redemption is going to factor in a huge way later in the film, we actually don't see much. We don't see Will making decisions that are bad. We actually see him as, I've been obedient and submissive to everything you've wanted me to do, boss. Right? So he's been a good employee. He's trying to be a gentleman. He wants to, he already is kind of repentant. He's already repentant
Kind of like,
in one
I've
sense.
done so many terrible things. Like he recognizes that they're not good things that he was doing.
Yeah, but we never get to see him do any bad things. We don't get to see him, like, even when he...
one flashback later in the film,
But it's kind of a mess where it's just a big morass of fighting and something going on and you're not sure what's happening and you don't see Will, like, killing a child or, you don't see the kind of bad assassin he used to be. It's all just assumed that you're going to believe it because we said it was so. And that's the kind of thing that then, because all of this happens such rapid fire style, right? You've got Will, you see him on a boat, you don't see him overcome conflict, you don't know anything about him other than you just saw him on a boat. And so you have no connection to the character. There's no sympathy. He doesn't have humor. He's not the conflicted soul that you just saw kill three guys. All he did was
do something cool.
Yeah.
Honestly, like when you're watching, you're like, oh, that's so cool. Like he just like took those guys out and he's like called the shot and he's like,
yeah, he just did some American Sniper and then
jumps off the boat. He's a cool character and you're like,
but you know nothing about him.
Yeah.
There's no reason to care about him yet. And then,
or not like him.
Yeah. And then he shows up and he says, I want my money. And another thing is, like, if he was that bad and he has something that his boss wants, right? If he's a scoundrel who's just out there to get money by killing people and his boss wants this stack of papers, like, why wouldn't he just hang on to the stack of papers and say, not till you give me my money, bro, like, forget that. Like, that's more the character of the type of, like, scoundrel that he is, that he would be acting. But instead, he's like this nice little, his shoelaces are tied. He's got every T crossed and every I dotted, and he turns in the papers, and they still don't, they still don't honor him at all, because of course there's no honor among thieves, and so off they go. Well, by the time there's a threat on his life, I actually don't care that there's a threat on his life. Like, it wouldn't bother me at all that carriage blew up and that he was dead, and now the story is about this vicar who couldn't save an assassin, right? Like it would be just as fine for me to go forward with that kind of story as it would be for me to continue with the story that they actually made. And that's I guess some of, like, a good illustration of what I mean. But there's so much of that happens in the movie that assumes that because we said this, that you're going to feel it. That because we said he was an assassin, you're going to think he was bad.
Yeah.
And so when the redemption comes, well, then the redemption is going to be really deep because, man, he's turning away from this dark past, right?
Yeah.
But I have no reason to think he had a dark past. Everything he's doing is good.
I think there's,
Even when he shows up in the church and the way he treats Charlotte, his love interest, that turns out, because just to carry the plot forward, I don't think this was necessarily mentioned in the summaries we read, but he serves as his vicar. He ends up showing up in the community where the vicar was headed. And so they were expecting a new vicar, and here he is, and he's not a trained preacher at all.
I think that's the best scene in the entire movie was when he tries to preach, and I think it's actually cut better than really anything else in the film.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
It's framed the best, and it makes you feel like, oh man, this is really embarrassing. Like that's it, but it doesn't do that anywhere else.
It just stops.
Yeah, because you feel it. You feel like, oh, this is hardcore. But the parts when it's like, you need to feel this, you don't feel it, because it's more than just telling you, oh, somebody's dying. You need to feel this, like, and watching him cry. Like, there's more to getting you to that point. There's more work, in terms of editing and music and cinematography to get you to that point where you really do care when somebody dies. Like, there's a lead up, there's work, there's magic that you're doing.
Yep.
But there's none of that. So when his servant or assistant, whatever, dies, it
doesn't hit you at all.
You don't feel anything. Like, you don't see any moments beforehand where they're like hanging out or when he's helping him.
Right, you see one conversation that they had together about the East India Company, and that was it.
And then they have this theological conversation, and he dies.
And the theological conversation was so
it's
ham-fisted,
so perfect.
Right.
He says exactly the right things, like theologically.
Right. It feels like, hey, here's where he would say something theological, and so let's make sure that we get it all right, instead of actually being human. And how would he actually communicate this? And would he? Is there any kind of past? Are these characters? Are they real characters? I feel like that's maybe the weakness of the whole film. I think the characters
could have been
themselves.
Really cool if they would have just kept him alive, and he just continued to talk into his life, and they would have built that relationship to where that would mean something. Like, you would feel like it meant something to you because you grew attached to this character.
Yep.
But just immediately, like, they kill him, and same thing for Charlotte. It's the same reason why their romance doesn't really play, is because all you see is a kung fu montage, or not kung fu, but just a montage.
Yeah.
Like that, like. That doesn't give you like, oh well, she really appreciates him.
Right. You see him writing, or the narration is a letter that he had written to Charlotte apparently, and he's writing it. Or so you're hearing him talk about how those months were the best months he's ever had, and you see a montage of them walking together, and that's all that happens. You don't actually get to see him and her interacting. You don't get to see them having dinner together and get a conversation and see how the conversation interplays and the kind of flirtations that he might do to try to win her heart, or you don't see that.
Yeah.
And so since you don't see it, you don't actually believe it. I mean, if you're willing to suspend your disbelief and just buy what they have to say and say, "Yep, sure, I'm here for the ride, and I'm going to believe what you say is there."
Yeah.
But it refuses to. But that's a refusal to accept life as it is, right? Like it begins. You're really,
if you're really a bad character and you have really no morals and you're killing people all the time, I have very little belief that you'll like start doing things the right way and not at any point be tempted to do something not couth, like to do something that's like not like a vicar, like especially when you're in that emotional phase, because like it chooses to depict a particular romance that involves courtship and involves this kind of relationship that requires another person giving consent and all these things. It chooses to frame this, but it also doesn't show the trials and tribulations that come from that kind of relationship.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't show the pitfalls that come, because it's not a perfect kind of no way of.
And even if it did show the pitfalls, why would he bear with the pitfalls? Because he has no principles behind it.
Well, I think even he has no principles behind it, and so you could show that. Like, even just show him mess up or try to advance something, and that would show the virtue of Charlotte, or maybe some humanity in Charlotte, and the fact that she wants that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like the whole time it kind of just seems like she's just leading him on the whole time, like in this weird way of not, obviously she's not, what, like they don't want her to give in to him at all, and she's person. But I think
Right.
you can summarize her relationship with him with the fact that when she just jumps off the boat and she just says, "Save me," and she just jumps off the boat. It's like a constant like forced proving that he has to do, and which is fine, and he does it. But
Yeah, except
I don't know.
it just feels flat to me because there's not really, again, we're not shown it. Like I could believe that would happen, but I need to be shown it. But the moment that you start showing it, and this is where I think the problems come, or where I start to feel it more, is like the moment that I say, okay, wait a second, like I don't think you're showing me enough. If you need to show me something, and once I start thinking about what I would like them to show me, suddenly what they are telling me starts to not make any sense, because I'm like, wait a second, she wouldn't actually go for him, and he wouldn't actually pursue her this way. You know, he would be just straight up after her. And who cares about respecting your wishes and all this? Like, what reason does he have to?
Yeah, and it like because I think that could play. If
It would
you
be
show,
really
if
fun.
if you show him, well, also like the way that they try to go with it, there's things missing. Like you're saying, where is that point where he decides to make that conscious effort to pursue her the way he is?
Right. Yeah.
Like, where is the moment where he comes into like, even if you're to do it with scripture, like to just have him sitting there and be like, this is a reason, but instead we're left with no reason at all. I don't think that's a great reason, a great way to do it. But I think that there's,
like I would love to see the scenes. And like, this is what I would love to see: is him as the vicar, where he is in the pulpit reading a sermon, because all of it is going to be pre-written stuff that he's finding. So he's reading out a sermon, and it says something about justice or like turning the other cheek, and he's like live in front of them changing it, because he's like, no, you go after him. If they punch you in the nose, you punch him in the throat. You know, like that he is, as a preacher, bending the word to match his lifestyle, because he doesn't want to live that. Or kind
even
of a
just
lifestyle.
showing like if you really want to go with like the vision that they had, I think that even their vision wasn't executed correctly, because if they really wanted to show that, like show him interact with it and twisting it, but also show him reading it for the first time, and if he is really truly having that repentant heart, like that could be comical in and of itself, of just like of him going, oh,
right, just it like coming,
and that would be a good way to go.
Yeah.
Okay, well now he's learning about like certain moral like things that he's being pricked about something, but you never see the pricking. You just see, I'm after this lady, and
I'm going to earn her.
When that's your trust, motivation, and there's nothing guiding it behind it. Like,
it's just falls for flat characters. It's just super one-dimensional characters who are just following the plot instead of the plot following them. Because plot, like we talked, or I mentioned a book by Kim Weiland in one of the first one of the first episodes that talks about building character arcs, and that the story flows out of the arc, the desires and the motivations of the character. And I think that this is the kind of thing that there is this plot that's been constructed up above, right? That says, here's how the story is going to go. It's going to go from here to here to here to here to here. And it's all sorts of interesting places that the story wants to go, but that in the end, the characters they have don't actually go there. And so they have to constantly just kind of bend the characters to do what they want. So that you've got this a hyper Calvinist story where the characters in the story have no freedom, and they're just like not acting on their own accord. It's just kind of like they're puppets with strings, and that's all you've got. You don't feel like they're living and breathing people.
And like they're making choices. Like they're like, I'm going to do this. Like, and that comes with like the stakes.
And they're not presented with dilemmas. That's interesting. Like thinking about choices.
That's the thing that's what, like, if I were to redo the movie, I would add teeth to it. Like, cool, you got the vision. You want this to be a truly Christian film. Show what Christians actually deal with. Like, I think they try to do that with him, but like with everybody around them, they're also like especially Charlotte. She's just very like one-dimensional. When like there's times that he does try to go three-dimensional, but Charlotte's so one-dimensional that it doesn't play. Yeah. And so like I think if you add teeth to it and you add like struggles that they have, like if you want to present that, like I said, that type of romance and that type of relationship, show the trials of that relationship. Right. Show what they're dealing with. If you want to present an assassin, somebody with a horrible past, come on. Like, talk with your congregation. I'm sure you'll find somebody that maybe wasn't raised in a Christian church, and you don't even have to go that far. You can look in even of yourself and know what a horrible person can look like. Yeah. Like, You don't need to present it as like they present him as cool and not.
Yeah, exactly. There's actually nothing to redeem. I think that's so. To go to, let's just jump to the redemption side of the plot, because in the movie they try to make this guy come to Jesus, and number one, I would say that they actually don't present the name of Jesus at all, do they? They talk about the name. There's only one name, but did they actually?
He says, "In my Savior Jesus Christ." I think he says that on the boat. Like he says, like I've trusted in. Jesus Christ is my one Savior.
So it's very light though on the theology, like in terms of the actual presentation of the gospel, and it is, and because so you've got this story arc of this character who he's this bad guy, right? Like he's an assassin. He wants to earn redemption by doing things, but you can't earn redemption by doing things. What has to happen is you have to find justification in Jesus Christ, right? That's true. That's right. That is the gospel. We are all sinners who cannot work to save ourselves. We have to find our salvation in the work that Jesus did for us on our behalf. And when you recognize that and you humble yourself and accept that, that is what it means to be a Christian, to believe the Christian faith.
Yeah.
And so like, yes, that is the gospel. But in the context of the story, you've got a guy who has never been bad, who has all along been very virtuous with Charlotte. He has not been super violent or unethical. Even in the beginning, you don't know who's giving him commands, and you don't know that those commands are evil. Like, he's just this guy on a boat who they say he's bad, but they're not showing him doing anything that you would morally object to.
Yeah, there's just one part when he's like whipping a person. That's it.
And that's the end.
Yeah,
right.
And it's a dream that he has.
And that's even later. Right? So I mean, you just don't have him being bad, and you don't see him growing either from the get-go. He's repentant of his lifestyle and wants to get out. And when he's with Charlotte, he wants to earn her favor and be an honorable man, right? Like, so all along, he's just wanting to do the right thing. He wants to avenge the vicar for having died, right? He everything he does is
defend
good,
people,
right? Like he's being a good person. And so when it comes to the redemption, the question is, why does he need the redemption? And that's not a theological question. I'm asking that as a story question. I understand the theology of it. But because even the best of people need redemption. But you're trying to paint him as an assassin. Even that synopsis we read, an assassin seeks redemption.
Yeah.
But what is he trying to be redeemed from? You haven't shown us. So it doesn't actually hit me that he's changed at all, because he actually hasn't changed at all. And his conversion, what impact does that have on the story?
It doesn't. It doesn't change how he would have handled the situation at all. The only thing it does is it checks the box for her to move forward in their relationship. That's the only thing that accomplishes.
That's interesting.
That allows her to be more comfortable with him. That's the only thing that him coming to know the Lord changed things.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I think he would have, with the way things were trending, he would have revealed who he was. He would have done all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And obviously that's not their intent. That wasn't. That they wouldn't give that reasoning. I think the writers, but that's what they're.
But in the context of what they created, right? Because you're not able to like. Jackie Chan said this in a interview that I saw in a film essay about movies. He's like, there is the movie, and that is it. And he says, you don't get to go around to all the theaters as it's being shown and say, oh, we had a small budget, or we ran out of time, or something like that. Yeah. You don't get to go do that. All that people see is the movie. So make sure the movie is good, because that's the only thing that exists.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those situations where I can give them that they were trying to do something really good. And I applaud what they were aiming for, but they didn't hit it. What they created is not that thing. And instead cheapens the very thing they were trying to create. That by trying to create a digital gospel tract, they made the whole thing cheap, and they made the gospel cheap, where the gospel is this thing that you tag onto your life.
And
it's already
good for
pretty
virtuous
cool.
people.
Yeah, right.
It's not good for the person who's vile and corrupt. Like I just want to point like to a good example of this being done. Les Mis. If you haven't seen Les Mis, it's a great movie. Just obviously, we'll read a review before you watch it. But it's so well done. Jean Valjean, thief. You see him as a thief. Even though he's kind of forced into it, you still see his volition and that animal like sin nature that he has, and he's just eating things, and he's running around stealing. He's been hurt. All these reasons for why he does it, but it's still a sin. And
he's really bad.
He meets a priest, and he steals from the priest, and the police officers bring him back, and the priest says, "Oh no, I gave him all of these things, and here's more things," and he shows him Christ and that action,
right.
and he's really confused about it, and then he brings him in. He's like, "I didn't do that for you. I did that for Christ." And he's like, "Who is this God? Who is this Christ that you wouldn't turn me in and I would be back in prison?" And like, that's the moment that you're missing in this movie.
Right. Because it cost the priest something.
Yeah, it did.
Grace was costly.
Yeah. And it shows the nature of the gospel, which shatters the world that you live in.
Yeah.
Like Augustine says that he called out into my darkness and he shattered it. Like,
and I would have loved to see, in some ways, like I would love to see the assassin movie where the assassin comes to Jesus because of someone demonstrating grace to the assassin.
Yeah, assassins are more than snipers. Assassins are people who get in there, who know you, who are friendly, who betray trust, and then they end up stabbing you in the back and then just leaving as if it were nothing. Like, how broken is that?
Yeah. What else has to be broken in your ethics and in your morals to be able to do that?
And then you have to redeem an entire life of doing that. Like, imagine that. Redeeming that and the weight of all of these men.
And they tried to show
killed.
that with the flashbacks as if he's got this burden on him. It's just, I just don't believe it, right? Like from the film, I'm given no reason to believe that actually is a real weight.
Yeah.
And then we get to that's just... So we've talked about the romance, we've talked about the conversion. Mm-hmm. There is so much else in this movie that is going on. We've got Ben Franklin, and he is the most one-dimensional character in the world.
He's just a quote dispenser.
He's there to say things that sound
that Ben Franklin actually said.
Yeah, right. Like, what kind of quotes can I give at the weirdest of times? And the script, it's like Ben Franklin is sitting there checking a script on screen. Oh, okay, hang on. Let me say this:
freedom and security,
right.
Or liberty and security.
Yeah, and so it's just, and so the plot goes into weird directions, and it doesn't. There's this plot against the Continental Congress. They're going to blow up a whole part of Philadelphia, and which is cool. Like, I love the idea of the end. I love that kind of historical fiction. I think that it's so cool. I would love that done well.
So many people have done it.
But then you combine this and this plot against the king or against the colonies with this kind of storytelling that doesn't let it unfold. Mm-hmm. And so instead we're told up front so we, the audience, know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But it's not like, but then the players, the people start to catch up, and there's none of that tension. So Alfred Hitchcock famously talked about putting a time bomb under a conversation. You can have a dinner conversation, and that conversation is as boring as anything else. But you put a time bomb under there, show the audience that there's a time bomb under that table. Don't tell anyone at the table, and now you have a movie. And people will hang on every word that's said at the dinner table, because the next one might be the word that someone says that brings attention to the fact that there's a bomb, or maybe it won't. And the time bomb keeps ticking, and that keeps our attention, that tension and that conflict.
Yeah.
And so we've got the potential for the time bomb
and
here.
Time bombs.
We literally have a time bomb.
Yeah.
But there is no tension because we know that there's a time bomb, and then they know that there's a time bomb, and that's all there is. There's like, if there were stuff happening up above where Will is trying to fight off some bad dudes.
If you go back to Skyfall, like the whole time, and you know that somebody's going after M, but M that this whole thing's going on, and Bond's trying to stop it, but she's still having this speech, and he's getting closer and closer and closer and closer.
And Bond's trying to race.
Yeah.
Like the tension that can be there.
She hasn't answered her phone, and you're just like, oh my gosh, this is getting crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
but there's none of that at the biggest set piece of the entire movie. And the only thing you're thinking is, this is cool, right? Like, it looks cool. It's supposed to be cool. Your brain is, I guess, if you've watched enough movies or a few enough movies, you're thinking that this is cool, and that this is supposed to be tense, but it just doesn't register on that in that way. Mm-hmm. It doesn't actually play to that kind of tension at all.
Also, the bad guy is not very evil.
No,
the most evil thing he does is he backhands his niece.
Yeah.
Did you see that part of the movie?
Yes.
It was quite comical.
It's like an elbow, isn't it? Like an elbow?
Oh yeah, it was an elbow. It was like boom. He was like blah 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 blah. Boom, and throws his elbow back into her face.
It's kind of like a Three Stooges moment of like
there's no like sound effects. She's just like passes out
down on the ground.
Yeah,
and that's what sets him off to sets Will off to come and save her.
Which any man, saved or unsaved, would do what he did.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just this. And I will admit that I wish that final set piece had been done well, because the piece itself, like the setting, the idea of this electricity power generator under the water,
They
under
put
this
so
windmill,
much thought into it.
Like it
they're
is
actual
so,
inventions that Thomas Edison actually, or not Thomas Edison, but Ben Franklin actually had. Like they were
it's so cool.
yeah.
It's just emotionally, the movie doesn't actually climax there. It's already as good as done. You know, like Ben Franklin's diffusing the bombs, right? Like there's no, the stakes are not present. The only stakes you have are Will and his girlfriend Charlotte, his soon-to-be wife, it seems, and you just don't care about them that much. And so if you've got all of that together, and then it doesn't work. So you've got, in the end, we are Christians. We are people who should understand the nature of the world, the way that human behavior works, the way that our sin drives us and motivates us, and the way that it plays tricks with us. We should be people who understand that better than anyone else. Yet, if we do movies that don't say something true about the nature of human character, that don't actually demonstrate the gospel of redemption in real ways, then all we are doing is presenting a cheap parlor trick that says, "Hey, here's the gospel." You know, basically, this is a $1 million chick track. Do you know what a chick track is, by the way?
No.
Okay, so a chick track, Jack Chick made these little comic book tracks that were, I don't know how many. They were small.
Oh, I know
like
what you're talking about. Yep.
3 by 4 inches maybe.
I see them at like bank ATMs all the time.
Yeah, and they open up and they have a random little cartoon, and they're what I just described as far as Beyond the Mask, that they are a cheap presentation of the gospel that cheapens it. It's the true gospel. I'm not saying that it's a false gospel, but the packaging makes the gospel look cheap, which the gospel is nothing cheap. The gospel is, it's the undergirding reality of everything we know, right? Yeah. And yet, by trying to make this kind of a gospel tract, all we end up doing is just cheapening the gospel.
Yeah, and I would just add primarily, it falls into that foible of Christian marketed movies, and the fact that this movie and their goal was to make a movie that is gospel focused and about saving people. Who is it made for? Again.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. It's made for Christians. The only people who are going to enjoy this are Christians, and even at that, a very specific set of Christians.
Yep.
Like, this would not play globally. This would not play to a global audience.
No.
This would not play even, I think, hyper nationally and cross denominations.
I would say the only reason this movie got distribution like it did is because here's how distributors work. Right? Exactly. They are not thinking about the messaging. They're not thinking about these other things. What they're looking at is a dollar amount and how many butts can we put in the seats.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to
put Gimli on the front of a DVD and throw it in Walmart.
Yep. And the movie has enough of that appeal because it's got great costumes, it's got great sets, it's a period of American history that people are interested in.
Yeah.
So you get history buffs, you get people who are interested in the American Revolution.
Fantasy buffs.
Yeah, fantasy buffs. So all these kinds of cross sections, and then you add Gimli into it, and he's like the perfect fit for that then it gets people to watch. And when a distributor looks at it and they say, whoa, you've got Gimli in it, we know that Gimli is worth, let's say 10,000 eyeballs. I don't know how they would calculate it, but that's kind of what they're thinking is how many eyeballs will want to come to this just because of Gimli.
And we'll just put it on Amazon Prime for free.
And then that means 10,000 clicks. Yeah. And we know that 10,000 clicks means this many dollars, and that'll recoup our costs. So here, we're going to pay you filmmakers this money to put it on our platform because we know that if we put that on our platform, it's going to equal this number of dollars. They don't care about the messaging. They don't care about the quality of the thing. Most people. And I think there's some distributors that are better. But what they're after is getting the money. And so Gimli is a dollar amount. And that's why I think it's gotten such a wide... That's why it's on Amazon Prime right now, is because people see that it can make money because of the people that are involved in it. And that's not a bad thing. I'm all for filmmakers making money on this. I hope they made their money.
Yeah,
they did a lot of good work.
There's a lot of effort put into it.
They deserve the money that they're making from this thing. But we can't say that just because something was a financial success means it was actually an artistic success. For sure. So I want more money. I want more movies made like this. I want more people to invest that kind of time and energy and money into these movies. I just want movies that I also say are wonderful, you know, that are really good.
Exactly. And you just bring up the point. You're making a fun family action film, and and you want it to reach a wide audience. Well, there's plenty of films that do that and do it actually, I think,
Yeah, the hard part for me. So to close this out, when a friend of ours gave this movie to me to watch, he recommended it to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put it on for my kids. I knew I needed it. I had had the DVD for too long and I needed to get it back to them. And so finally I'm like, okay, we don't have anything picked to watch tonight for movie night.
Time with books.
Yeah. So we're going to watch this movie for movie night. I put it in, we started watching, and I don't remember exactly where we ended it, but it was somewhere around the time the romance was kind of kicking up. And I was just like, I can't do this. Like, this is so rough, and this is so boring, and my kids are not going to be invested in it. And I feel like I'm only watching this in order to, have watched it. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I was like, kids, we're going to find something else to watch. I just can't keep watching this. And my son said, confirmed. I never heard him use that word before. Yeah. But the kids even got like that. If we're going to watch something as a family that's fun and exciting, I would rather watch Pirates of the Caribbean than I would watch this. I would rather
just
watch
How to Train
Zorro,
Your Dragon.
Right?
Like,
yeah. If I want the messaging, I can go somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Like I can go somewhere else for better messaging. I can go somewhere else for in the same vein of what we've talked about before about Christ figures in movies. I can go to movies that I feel are actually deeply more Christian thematically, that say something more important to my children than this film can say. And so, it's a good film. If people enjoy it and they dig it, I'm all for them digging it. Yeah. It's great, but it's not the kind of film I want to be regularly made. Now, I will, if these people make another movie, I'll go watch it.
I will definitely go see it.
But because I want to support more of this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We need more people who are putting in their widow's might, right? Who are doing what they can in making this kind of stuff. I want more Christians making stuff just in general.
Yeah, they're pioneers for Christendom, and once
we put it out there, then but it's fair game for our kind of critique. They put it out in public. Yeah. It's fair game for our critique, and if we ever were to make a movie, then that movie's fair game for other people's critique. It's just that what I aspire to do is to make something that is deep and rich and shows the richness of the gospel in more than just a quick, cheesy message.
The sinner's prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, I think we have thoroughly finished talking about this one. This is one of our longest ever episodes.
I like it. Well, this is what started the whole podcast for us. We just keep talking about it. We're like, let's just get together and talk about films because it generated a conversation.
And this is what we're here for. So if you are still listening to this, we are grateful that you have stuck around, and we are glad that there are other people who are interested in listening to conversations like this yourself. So feed us your favorite Christian movies, and maybe we'll get around to talking about yours. We have some great ones we have seen in our lifetime that need some attention and some time. Some of them that don't deserve it. This one is one that I think does deserve it because it stands as a good test case of someone who tried to do something really big and just ended up out of their depth on the terms of the, what we've already talked about. So
I would invite a conversation with the Burns brothers if we could ever get it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if anybody listening can make that happen, I would love to.
We would be glad.
Spend hours talking with them.
We would be glad to have chats with them about filmmaking and all this stuff, and Kendrick's brothers too.
Yeah, any Christian filmmaker,
filmmaker, we'll have them on guest on the podcast and bring those conversations to you, our wonderful audience. So thanks for cozying up with us here in the farmhouse today, listening to our podcast. If you do have those comments or questions, you can always send them to josh@bartelsproductioncompany.com or find us on Facebook at Foxfire Farmhouse. We're also on Instagram. Find us there, message us, comment, and all of the above. We'd be glad to hear from you. If you would, consider giving the podcast a review on your podcasting platform. That helps us get out in front of people, or at least that's what I hear podcasters say. That's what I hear podcasters say that other people have said to them.
Leave a 5-star review. It really helps out. I don't know how it helps out, but I want to know.
It helps in our
getting in front of people.
Well, that's what they say, but it really just helps our psychology. It makes us feel better and affirmed in what we are doing, and that's really what we're doing. We're doing this for affirmation, really. That's the only thing we're here for. No. So just send your 5-star affirmations. If you send a 1-star, we're gonna break and cry and
we're here
quit
to save you, Christendom. We're here to save you. We have noble intentions, grand intentions. We're very self-righteous.
One day we might move beyond the mask of self-righteousness. Anyway,
we
we
all
better
hide behind masks.
we better quit this before we
just
go.
stop.
This has been another episode of
Yeah.
Foxfire Farmhouse.
Thank you, guys.
Goodbye.
Bye.